All right. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Transportation Committee for January, getting ahead of ourselves here. December 15th. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Last meeting of the year. So as a reminder, this meeting is being shared virtually through Zoom for those who couldn't join us today and is being recorded. Committee members, please remember to turn your mic on before speaking so that those online and in the room can hear you. I'd like to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves, and I can start. My name is Kevin Carrier with Lake County.
Tara Orban with Cook County.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
Megan Swanson, Illinois Department of Transportation.
Morning, Jackie Forbes, Kane County DOT.
Heidi Lichtenberger, Kendall County.
Christina Kapkowski, Will County.
Jeff Shriver, CDOT.
Good morning, Bob Dean, CNT.
Audrey Wenning, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Tom Vanderwood, Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission.
Chris Hebert, Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission.
Todd Schmidt, FHWA.
Eric Llewellyn, Pace.
Lynette Civarella, Metra.
Jack Cruikshank, IEPA.
Mark Kane, Federal Transit.
John Loper, DuPage County.
Kyle Whitehead, RTA.
Good morning. Happy holidays. Leon Rockingham, Mayor of the City of North Chicago, Council of Mayors.
Steve Schulke, IDOT Region 1.
Karen Robles, Illinois Tollway.
Jennifer Henry, CTA.
Doug Ferguson, CMAP staff.
Terry Dixon, CMAP staff.
Mike Vanderhoff, Illinois DOT.
Brandon Gaber, IDOT.
Evan Hayes, CMAP.
Brian Larson, Northwest Municipal Conference.
Drew Duffin, McHenry County Council of Mayors.
Matt Pasquini, DuPage Mayors Managers Conference.
Mike Clemens, Lake County Council of Mayors.
Leroy Claus, CMAP staff.
Mike Conley, CTA.
Good morning, David, Collins Engineers. Daniel Como, CMAP.
Amy McEwen, CMAP.
Camadab, CMAP staff.
Martin Menninger, CMAP. Russell Petroviak, CMAP staff.
Mike Sopchak, CMAP staff.
Sarah Stolpe, CMAP staff.
Jenny Vanna, CMAP.
Stephanie Pfeiffer, CMAP.
Victoria Barrett, CMAP.
John Carpenter, CMAP.
Kasha Hart, CMAP. Kim Colodi Jacobs for IDOT Bureau of Safety Programs and Engineering.
Lindsay Bailey, CMAP.
Blanca Vella Schneider, CMAP.
Online, we have Bill Barnes, Clark Shoup Diggs, Craig Heather, Aaron Alaman, Heather Mullins, Jared Patton, Jason Navoda, Joe Surdam, Julie Reschke, Carly Cazzato, Katie Hurtis, Laura Wilkinson, Ryan Tomto, and that's it.
All right. Thank you and welcome, everyone. And moving on to item 2.0, agenda changes and announcements. We have had a request to move item 5.01 up on the agenda. It's the IDOT presentation that Kim Colodi is going to present. So move that up and in front of 4.03, which is our action item on the safety targets. So we'll go ahead and make that an adjustment to the agenda. Let's see here, and then I do have an announcement this morning. I'd like to recognize Mike Conley, who's retiring from the CTA at the end of this month. I see that he's already moved to retiree row there in the back in the audience. So this will be his last meeting, attendance TC, unless he does come and want to join us in the future. So I'd like to thank Mike for his years of service in this committee. If our records are correct, he's been a member of this committee for 17 years. So congrats on your retirement, Mike, and you've always done a great job and just provided leadership to the region, and everyone owes you a debt of gratitude for all your service. So we really appreciate it, and congratulations. Do we have any other announcements from committee members? Seeing none, moving on to item 2.02 CMAP updates. Today, Amy Lee is with us to provide an update on the CMAP agency and board activities.
Good morning. So just thank you to all of you who joined us last Thursday to celebrate the completion of the Plan of Action for Regional Transit. We are excited to continue to support our transportation partners on this critical issue, as well as our legislative partners in the General Assembly as we enter into this new year and a new session. In case you missed it, there is a NOFO out there right now for raise grant funding. Available funding is to the tune of 1.5 billion. Applications are due February 28th. So just wanted to highlight that reminder. Some past successful projects include the Pace Bus Halstead line, as well as the CTA received, I believe, 25 million for bus charging equipment at 95th Street Red Line. So please be aware of that opportunity if you don't want to miss it. Last month, USDOT announced the creation of the Office of Multimodal Freight Infrastructure and Policy. This is the Multimodal Freight Office. And that office will oversee the maintenance and improvement of the nation's freight network and supply chains. In partnership with the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, the new office will continue advancing the DOT's Freight Logistics Optimization Works program, FLOW, which is a public-private partnership that brings together U.S. Supply chain stakeholders to facilitate a more reliable flow of goods as we, try to open up those networks and get things going. Establishment of this office is included in CMAP's federal and state advocacy agenda, so we were very pleased to see that this was established. USDOT Road Usage Charging Advisory Panel. Last month, FHWA put out a notice seeking nominations to the Federal System Funding Alternative Advisory Board. This advisory board will be tasked with crafting recommendations related to the structure, scope, and methodology for developing and implementing the National Motor Vehicle Per Mile Use Fee Pilot Program, right? MBUF, RUC has all the different acronyms. Right now, the Midwest is underrepresented when it comes to RUC pilots. So to make sure our region is represented, we submitted a nomination for our Executive Director, Aaron Alleman, to serve on this advisory board. And we hope to expect to hear back from them next year on that nomination. A few things on the horizon you might want to be aware of. CMAP is preparing for another region-wide household travel survey. We just got that notice to proceed. So as that advances, we'll be sure to keep you plugged in on how that goes. CMAP is also preparing for the 2024 application cycle for Technical Assistance Awards. You may know it as the LTA program, but we plan to launch the application in late February with a call for projects. Technical assistance provides communities with support to implement our region's shared vision. It has historically helped numerous communities through hundreds of projects awarded thus far. More information to come at the February or March meeting, March 1. So that takes us to just sort of wrapping up this year. We really have been appreciative of everybody pulling together. We've had some big topics to cover this year. We expect the same and probably more next year. Please know I'm working with staff and with stakeholders to kind of provide a look ahead at some of those big topics that take us into next year, make sure that our conversations together are meaningful and worthwhile. We're going to highlight things like the next long-range transportation plan. Certainly safety will be an ongoing issue, and the climate action plan. These are all big touch points for this committee. So we hope to strategize good discussions for us into the new year. So with that, thank you again for your partnerships. Please reach out to me if there are other things that you would like for me to keep in mind as we look ahead. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I think, Tara, you said you had a question.
I do. Thank you for the updates. The household travel survey, can you remind me what that is again, what it's used for, and maybe how the committee members can help support that?
Yeah, thank you. The main key thing that this committee will want to know is that that is the data that feeds the travel demand model. And so needing to know how travel behavior, how people navigate the transportation system, tied to the characteristics of those households and things like that, particularly important on our equity issues, right? And so this is, we're recognizing that things are changing so quickly sometimes that we need to maybe adopt a new strategy around how we collect that data, much like the census. Instead of every 10 years, maybe we should be going at it more routinely to try to keep ourselves fresh on those things. Because it does require a lot of, good input, we would appreciate it when we get there to help us get the word out on that survey and just how important it is to our region to get good data on that. Good. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Any other questions for Amy? All right, thank you, Amy. Moving on to item 3.01. We have before us the draft minutes from our November 17th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as presented? Sure. Oh, yeah.
I had asked about a potential presentation by IDOT on I-290, and I don't see that reflected in the notes. Is that something that is still being considered?
Definitely. That's one of many things that we're trying to strategize for a good discussion. I think it makes sense to have that conversation into next year in context to what we want to achieve with the regional transportation plan. So please know, we haven't forgotten that. We're just trying to make sure we have a good discussion on that.
All right. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes November meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to item 4.01. We got Russell with us here for a couple items. The first one is providing an overview of the fiscal year 2023 through 2028 Transportation Improvement Program, amendments and administrative modifications. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the TIP amendment 24-03.
You want me to present it first?
I guess we do it either way. Present it first and then do the motion. Get ahead of myself there, Russell. Thank you very much.
I'm more than welcome to sit down. Included in your packet today is a memo detailing the 52 tip changes contained in formal tip amendment 24-03 and the 128 tip changes contained in administrative amendments 24-03.1 and 24-03.2. As seen in the memo, formal amendments resulted in an increase of $262.1 million in total project costs for all prior, current, and future years. There are a lot of good investments in the region that are reflected in the formal TIP amendments being presented that I wanted to call your attention to. One of the biggest changes on this amendment is the addition of $117 million in mega grant funding by Metra to replace 11 bridges on the UP North Line. That is TIP ID 18-08-2500. We also are seeing increases in the cost for bridge projects, and there are a few of those on this amendment, including the full replacement of the New York Street Bridge in downtown Aurora. And finally, additional funding was added to 2 RSPs. We'd like to see the RSPs moving forward, one in Kane and one in McHenry that are targeting 2024 lettings. The one in Kane is US 20, RSP 113. Which added $28.8 million, and the other one is Illinois 47, RSP 110, which added $15 million. Administrative amendments added $94 million to the TIP in all prior, current, and future years. The net change in total cost in the TIP from all amendments resulted in $356.1 million being added to the TIP in prior, current, and future years. As shown in the memo, project phases moving into and out of the TIP comprise most of the formal changes, and administrative amendments were primarily schedule and cost changes. The amendments, along with the memo, were posted on December 9th for committee and public review. And at this time, I request approval of the formal TIP amendment 24-02 as is requested, and I can answer any questions if there are any.
All right, thank you, Russell. Before we get into questions and discussion, get a motion first. Entertain a motion. Approve the item. Thank you, Lynette. We got a motion from Lynette.
And I'm sorry, I need to make a revision. I think the amendment actually is 24-03. So I request 24-03, not 24-02, which is what I just said.
Gotcha. Yes. So entertain a motion to approve tip amendment 24-03. Got Lynette still? Got a second? Christina? All right. Any questions or discussion for Russell? If not, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Sticking with Russell, we have an updated plan and tip conformity along with amendment 24-04. So Russell.
All right, also included in your packet today is the onto 2050 tip conformity analysis and tip amendment 24-04. As you know, the CMAP region is a non-attainment area for ozone, thus we are required to demonstrate that projects in the tip conform to our motor vehicle emissions budget for our region through a regional emissions analysis. Specifically, projects in the tip subject to air quality analysis requirements demonstrate, when modeled, that the region does not exceed our motor vehicle emissions budget, which is shown near the end of the memo in the packet. The memo and the list of projects that are new or had changes was discussed at the recent Tier 2 interagency consultation meeting on November 30th and was available for public comment for 30 days, which closed on December 11th. The Tier 2 members did not have any concerns with the conformity amendment. We did, however, receive one public comment, which I'm going to read at this time. Hello, I live by the Green Bay Trail in between Hubbard Woods and Glencoe metro stations. I love the easy access to such a beautiful trail, but each time I run, bike, and bring my daughter to the trail, which is at least twice a day, I am concerned with what we are breathing in from the metro pollution. I have read several articles about how there is a great concern with health issues associated from metro pollution. It seems that the concern started in 2010. The EPA has done several tests by Ogilvy and Union Station, which indicate heart and lung damaging pollution. I tried contacting the EPA to test at the stations near us to get an idea of how bad it is, but they have not responded. New emission standards by the EPA went into effect in 2015, but Metro's old trains were grandfathered in. New locomotives must pass emission standards considered Tier 4. Metro still has Tier 0 locomotives, although I did see it in their 2024 budget to change the Tier 0 locomotives to Tier 3, which isn't that not meeting the EPA standards of Tier 4. I have discussed with multiple neighbors and everyone agrees that it's a concern of theirs. Metro has made progress and is going to install 16 new zero emission locomotives to their Rock Island line. I'm excited there is progress being made. However, it has been at least since 2010, since it has been a well-known public concern with the EPA involved. It is concerning that we are in a non-attainment area, and it seems like steps have not been taken quick enough. I recently saw a PowerPoint from Sean Cronin and Kevin Clifford from 2021 listing UP North as proposed zero emissions pilot corridor. I'm hoping someone has information on this and if there is a proposed date for this to go into effect. So we forwarded a comment onto Metro. Metro has already responded to the individual, and there is no further action at CMAP where this committee needs to consider. The matter has been addressed. With that, staff requests the committee recommend approval of the semi-annual onto 2050 tip conformity analysis and tip amendment 24-04 to the CMAP board and MPO policy committee as presented. And if there are any questions at this time, I can answer them.
All right. Thank you, Russell. I'll entertain a motion to approve recommending the plan and a tip conformity analysis along with tip amendment 24-04 to the MPO policy committee and CMAP board. Do I have a motion? Thank you, John. Second?
Second.
Tara, thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, this is our item that we're moving up today. So we're moving up item 5.01 in advance of 4.03. So today we have Kim Colodi with us from Jacobs Engineering representing IDOT to talk about the state's roadway safety targets. I also like to acknowledge that Mike Vanderhoff is here from IDOT, who traveled up today from Springfield. So thanks for being here, Mike. And Kim's walking up to the podium.
Thank you for the invitation. How about that? Is that better? Okay. Yeah, thank you for the invitation today to talk about the target setting for IDOT as well as the Highway Safety Improvement Program. I'm Kim Colodi with Jacobs. I've been working with the team supporting the IDOT Bureau of Safety Programs and Engineering for a number of years. So going back to 2006, I've had the privilege to work with BSPE. And, you know, unfortunately, Stefan, the new bureau chief, was not able to be here today. He's in Texas or just wrapping up a peer exchange, sharing information on transportation safety programs across the country. So was really engaged in traffic safety, understanding what agencies are doing across the country to make sure that Illinois is proactive in reducing fatalities and serious injuries. So it's a really exciting time. I'm sorry that, again, that he can't be here, but I'm glad that I can be here to provide some background. So on the next slide, you'll see these were some of the things that were asked. I'm not sure why that's echoing, to talk about today. An overview of the Highway Safety Improvement Program, the IDOT targets, and then some of the special rules. So, yep, on the next slide, if you go to that. So as you all know, the HSIP program is one of the 6 core federal programs under transportation legislation with the specific goal of mitigating and seriously reducing fatalities and serious injuries on all public roadways across the network. So it's a real focus on bringing those serious crashes down. It is required to be data-driven, as well as a strategic approach to this. And target setting is certainly part of this requirement. There are several components as part of the HSIP. One is the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which is on IDOT's website. The current version goes from 2022 to 2026, and that provides kind of the overarching vision for high priority areas to focus on within the state, as well as the longer range targets and vision, and addresses some of the special rules that are included in there. So in the current SHSP, we focused on a safe system approach, which is more comprehensive, looking at users, roads, speeds, post-crash care. There might be a 5th. I'd have covered them all, something like that. But it's really this comprehensive approach. And it also looks at equity and how equity is really brought in as one of the foundational principles for highway traffic safety so that we better understand it and we make sure that we're engaging a variety of communities, especially underserved communities, and that funds are allocated, appropriately in order to really address our system-wide needs. In addition to the HSIP, there's the HSIP program, which is the funding component for primarily infrastructure projects, although in the past we were able to flex that to use some of it for behavioral programs. That went away, and I think we might have a little bit of flex opportunity again now. And then the railroad highway grade crossing and high-risk rural roads all fall under that HSIP umbrella. So this next one shows the allocation of funding and how we do this in Illinois. So there's the overall program and then a set aside for rail. So the set aside for rail is about 10% of the overall budget. So 90% of it goes to roads. And then back to the rail side, 40% goes to state rail and 60% goes to local rail grade crossings. And then over on the road side, 70% goes to the state routes, and then 30% goes to local routes. So this is a change. So in previous years, it was 80-20, and there's recognition that about half of the fatalities are really occurring in the local system, and we need to do more on the local system in order to really address our needs to bring down fatalities and serious injuries. And we need to make that process kind of straightforward so that we can really get the projects in the ground, both from an infrastructure perspective, but also target education and behavioral programs to make sure that they're really making a difference as well. So from there, there's the state money goes into, it's allocated to the districts, but then another portion of that stays at the statewide level and is used for systemic improvements really across the system. So, and then on the local side, there's the local HSIP, but then there's also high-risk rural roads. So there is a special rule, which we'll talk about. And if we have an increase in fatalities on high-risk rural roads, then we need to allocate additional funds to those routes specifically that fit that criteria. So in some years, we've had, if you stay on that side just for 1 minute, but I just want to say in some years, while we've got this 70-30 split, what we're also seeing is that good projects are important, right? Projects that are going to reduce fatalities and serious injuries, that target those crashes and have countermeasures that are proven effective to reduce those. So in some years, we have tapped into the statewide money at the bottom of that row there and use that for some of the local HSIP projects. So there's a little bit of flexibility in this depending on the projects that come in and are applied for. So you can see on the next slide, this is the overall budget. There's about 100 million that comes in each year for this HSIP program, and that we do anticipate that to increase over the coming years, depending on federal legislation. In this, there is a federal match, there's a state match, state and local match, I should have mentioned. So this covers 90% of the projects, but of the project costs, but then we still need to contribute that 10% match for each individual project. So when looking at this on the next slide, this shows that for the local level, for local roads, we allocate about 30 million each year, and that has been getting spent down. We're using all the money, we're allocating all those projects, and the quality of the projects continues to improve and increase over the years as we gain an understanding of how effective programs are really working, or what is most effective across our system. So you will see there's a circular letter that usually goes out in February that solicits applications for the HSIP program. And then there is a webinar that follows that. So the webinar talks through how to apply for HSIP, as well as some additional resources that are available to use in order to apply, in order to both understand the system, identify high priorities, and identify appropriate countermeasures and treatments for that. So local agencies are to coordinate with the districts when they're submitting those. A lot of times there may be projects that are maybe at a state and local intersection where there are multiple jurisdictions, or corridors where there are multiple jurisdictions. So it's important to have that engagement. And I know IDOT District 1 has been very supportive in reviewing HSIP applications, providing input. And so please, yes, engage them, work with them if you're not doing that already. The applications are due around April timeframe. And so for that, is there anything else? Let's see, I was gonna see if there's anything else to tell you about the HSIP process. We're seeing successful applications are those that, again, identify where the severe crashes are happening, why those severe crashes are happening, and then the countermeasure is a proven effective countermeasure associated with reducing that target crash type. So we see this a lot where we have to calculate a benefit cost analysis as part of this. We tend to look for a benefit cost that's over 1. However, there are some applications that come in that either eliminate some of the data or hunt for a crash modification factor that shows a greater effectiveness. And all of those are reviewed. So all those applications are reviewed when they come in. They're reviewed by a committee. They're reviewed to say, is this countermeasure reasonable? Is this a good location? Is this a high priority crash type for this community? And then they check the crash modification factors and everything and run the calculations. And then may come back to the district or the local agency to say, this is a good location. Why don't you think about protected lefts? Or why don't you think about some of these other treatments that might be effective? So that's a great process in getting a little bit of additional feedback if needed to make sure that those are addressing the system needs and those get approved through the process. The HSIP reports are posted online every year, so you can take a look at what is getting funded. You can see the exact, line items for projects. In the HSIP report, we have to include a lot of both the funding component of it. It talks about processes, any processes that may have changed, and then also reflection on special rules and whether or not there is a penalty, like the high-risk rural road that I mentioned. So this year, there was not a penalty for high-risk rural road. And there now is a vulnerable road user special rule, which we'll talk about in a minute. And that was not considered in this round, but will be included in the next round. So that's focusing on bicycles and pedestrians in particular. So. And then moving into target setting, sounds like that's something that you're going to be talking about after this as well. So target setting, just as a reminder, there are 5 performance measures that we need to set for the HSIP program. And those are fatalities, fatality rate, serious injury rate, and non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries combined. So we are evaluated on the 5-year rolling average for the last 5 years relative to the projected and then also relative to the actual. So relative to the target, we'll talk about the target for a minute, or on the next slide, we'll talk about how we set the targets. But the targets are set by the state, so we put that number in. And then the actual is measured by FHWA in their process, which basically says, what are we doing? Are we getting worse? Are we getting better? Looking at that 5-year rolling average. Then out of those 5 performance metrics, each of those are evaluated to determine whether or not we met that target. And we need to meet, and we can either meet it by hitting the target or by hitting it relative to the actual. And we need to hit 4 out of 5 of those in order to be considered substantially, to make significant progress. Okay, and whether or not we make significant progress kicks in other rules with the HSIP program. So if we don't make significant progress, then we need to develop an HSIP implementation plan, and all the funds need to be used for transportation safety projects and cannot be used for other programs or deferred to other programs. So if you go to the next slide. The first time we needed to do this was in 2017. So when we looked at this in 2017, we did a lot of analysis, a lot of different methods for projection. We coordinated with the districts. I say MPO, but I don't know if we actually coordinated with the MPOs when we set those targets back then. But we did have a team of people that was both in BSPE, but also represented other folks across the state in order to provide input on those targets. We looked at a variety of methods we did ordinary linear regression, least squared, we did a Holt method. There were probably 5 different linear projection methods that we used when looking at our historical performance and projecting it forward. Some of those methods look at more near time data more than longer term data. So we also looked at periods of time for setting these as well, like a 10-year rolling average and other ranges. We also looked at other factors so we know that there's a lot that influences fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. So we got information from the NOAA website and looked at weather and long-term trends. We looked at population data and driver's license data for older drivers and younger drivers and compared that to the trends. So if we had, more older drivers, then what is the fatality trend there versus younger drivers? What is the fatality rate there? And how does that influence the overall target? We also looked at gas prices and then we also looked at efficiency of use of the funds. So if we took all of the enforcement funds and used them specifically to address fatalities and serious injuries, if we use, of course, we do the best that we can right now. But basically, we looked at optimizing the funds, the HSIP program, the HSP program, and looking at all of this, of course, what did it tell us? That they're going up, right? So it was a little humbling, I guess, to go through this experience and then say, what can we do? And then a lot of these forecasts are going up. And so IDOT really struggled with this and said, you know what, our long-term vision is 0. And that's where we want to get to. So how can we set targets that are increasing and say that's our goal, to be increasing, yet this is uncomfortable for all, that none of us want fatalities across our system. So how do we grapple with this? So agencies across the country took different approaches. Some did set increasing targets, others set more what we call as visionary targets, or essentially going down. So Illinois came up with this approach then to say with this 2% decrease. So what we did is we used that ordinary least squared method, because that is a method that they've been using for the highway safety plan for a very long time. They're very comfortable with using that ordinary least squared methods for their target setting. So we use that approach when the trend was going down. So if the trend was going down, that was the method we used, and that's how we set that target. But if it was going up, then we used a 2% decrease. Okay. And that method and approach is what we continue to use today for setting those targets. So you'll probably see these later, but for the state, the targets are, they're 2% for fatality rate. But then the serious injuries were actually trending down. So those are down a little bit. So here on the next slide, this is from the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, recognizing that we're looking at 2%. But I guess we all know here that when you take 2%, 2%, it's going to take us a really, really long time to get there, and you don't actually ever get to 0. So we need to do more. We need to do better. But this sets a foundation for us to start achieving and start to do things differently. So in the next slides, this goes through, these are from the Highway Safety Improvement Program report submitted this year. It's not posted online yet because this one's fresh off the press and includes that 2022 data. You can see from this slide that the fatalities have been increasing, so we won't meet this target. And then if you go to the next slide, these are our serious injuries. So serious injuries, these are, there are more of them across the system, and these are trending down. So for this one, this is one that we did meet the performance metric last time around. And then on the next one, these are the fatality rate. So despite VMT and VMT climbing back up, we still have a high fatality rate, and that has been increasing. You see it's slightly down from 2021. So this one we did not meet, but this one, the serious injury rate, and again, this one does come down. So we were able to meet this one. And this one also used that ordinary least squared method to show a target down. So we met it in both respects. So if you go to the next slide, this is a variable of non-motorized. So this is bicycles and pedestrians combined, and fatalities and serious injuries combined. And I'm looking at the 5-year rolling average for this one during the reporting periods and the projection. it was coming down. So we were able to show a target of coming down. But as we all know, we're alarmed with our pedestrian fatalities, our bicycle fatalities, because they have been increasing in recent years. And those have been increasing really across the country. So you can see here in 2020, they have been increasing for the last few years. And the next slide talks about so we did actually meet that target, by the way. But here's another one that we don't necessarily meet. So getting into the special rules, the first one was high-risk rural roads. In the SHSP, we need to define what high-risk rural roads are. So that's in there. You'll find that definition. And if this 5-year rolling average increases over the 2-year reporting period, then additional funds need to be allocated there. So this year we didn't have that triggered, but we have had this triggered in the past. Older driver, older pedestrians. So this is the same approach, focusing on fatalities and serious injuries per capita for drivers and pedestrians over age 65. So this one, I know we've triggered this one in the past. We included strategies in the SHSP on this one. Not sure for this recent report if that one was triggered. But pedestrians, as you'll see in the next special rule, and vulnerable road users. So these are bicycles and pedestrians. And if there is more than 15% of the overall fatalities are vulnerable road users, then we need to allocate 15% of our HSIP dollars to bicycles and pedestrians. So this is a new one for this fiscal year that we are grappling with to identify $15 million worth of bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements. And again, these need to be really good projects that we see are proven effective in bringing down fatalities and serious injuries for bicycles and pedestrians, because that is the motivation for the legislation, for the dollars and how those should be used. So Illinois, we fall into that this year where we do need to allocate 15% of our HSIP dollars to those bike and ped projects. Most recently, there was every state this time around through this IAJA needs to develop a vulnerable road user safety assessment document. And this document, or rather the process, needed to be data-driven and collaborative, and really focus on gaining an understanding of bicycles and pedestrians, and both identifying targets, our performance, as well as identifying the contributing factors. They developed a high injury network out of this, as well as clusters across the state that could be evaluated for potential improvement for bicycles and pedestrians. And there are countermeasures and strategies that are proven effective for addressing these needs across the system that are all included in this plan. We had a really, I'll say it was really fun to work on this one. It was a major collaboration, I think, with FHWA. Todd sitting here was on a lot of our calls, and then some folks from CMAP and counties were really engaged through this process in a series of stakeholder meetings. So that really influenced the analysis as well as the outcomes that are included in the plan. I think so that piece of it, I think, is a reflection on what Illinois needs. The other thing, I guess, in this that was interesting is we did look at equity in a different way. Dr. Edwards had done an analysis looking at hospital data relative to crash data, and to gain an understanding of underreporting of pedestrian crashes in communities across Illinois. And so by doing that, we found that there was a lot of underreporting in some of areas that are underrepresented across the state. So, and it's down by an area basis. So we were able to use that information then to kind of correct for and come up with a different metric for ranking through that. The Vulnerable Road User Report is now available on the IDOT website. So you can see it here, so you can download it. I guess another key factor of this is that there was a component that had user input. So there's a map that allowed users to put in like where the locations of need are. And that was also factored into this prioritization approach as well. So there's perceived needs and quantified needs that were both incorporated in this. The next piece of this is getting these tools in your hands. There is a dashboard that's been developed through this process that shows all the clusters and the corridors. So it's interactive and you can work with it and then also overlay it with any programs you may have going on in place to identify what you might want to include here. Timing on that, I expect that some folks, probably some from CMAP or in this room, will have the opportunity to probably get in there and start playing with that in the next few weeks, and then maybe officially live after we get a little bit more input to make sure that it's really the most usable as it can. And then I would think like in the early spring, this will be launched. I know there is going to be a presentation on it at the THE. So that would at least be the goal, is to make sure that that's launched before that, and then have a webinar too to share that information, statewide. If you go to the next slide, yep, and then this was just other areas. So I'm not sure timing wise that hits what you were looking for and hits the key items, but just wanted to open it up here. And I know Vicky's got her presentation on targets, right? But if there was any questions that you've had, do we have a couple minutes to talk through those, or?
Yeah, certainly we do. So I appreciate it, Kim. I think there's a lot of work that is going on since 2017 and bringing that over to CMAP too. I know CMAP's got a lot going on with the Safety Resource Group and then the countywide safety action plans and things like that too. So I know the numbers aren't going the right way, but it's encouraging. There's a lot going on, and I think there's a lot of people paying attention to it. So hopefully we start seeing some trends shifting here. With that, I guess open it up for discussion, questions. Anybody have anything for Vicky? Yeah, John. Or sorry, Kim.
So Kim, you mentioned earlier that at times the HSIP will flex to behavioral programs.
Mhm.
So what's the trigger for that? Because in our area, we can engineer the heck out of our roadways, to prevent intersection crashes, angle turn movement crashes that result in injury and fatals. But we can't do much about the behavioral stuff. And that's one of the things that we are really wrestling with, is how through the Safe Streets for All program that we're going to entertain, can we really incent behavioral programs, education, enforcement, and that kind of stuff. And that's where we're really need to be focusing more effort on. I don't really think there's a lot of effort going on presently.
So, yeah, absolutely. So the question about behavioral programs and funding for those. So the HSIP is primarily focused on infrastructure and can be flexed a little bit for behavior. The highway safety plan, that's really focused on behavior. So there's a lot of funding there for, and you're probably familiar with the liaisons, the LELs that I think DuPage has probably used them in the past, right? And the STEP grants to provide additional enforcement for specific areas like speeding, occupant protection. I think there's one, distracted driving, I think is what they're for, right? So that, I would say HSP would be one of the sources. But there are other programs like, there's Safe Routes to School, there are, there's the ITAP, that's more bike ped, but there are a variety of other programs in addition to HSIP for that. In the past, I think HSIP has been used for additional kind of photo speed enforcement in work zones, I think is where it's been really targeted at this point. I would say, like, through that process of developing safety action plans, that's what you're talking about, right? With the safety action plans, part of this is really looking at the system and identifying the needs of the community. And, so if speeding is an issue, then identifying methods and ways to address that, one of which may be education. And education perhaps at high schools. So, and then linking that to particular funding sources. So, yeah, right now I would say tapping into HSIP for behavioral is not something it's been done and sort of isolated. I think there are just so many things that we need to do also from an infrastructure standpoint that they really see like, how can these be done together? So do we look at corridors where speeding is an issue and then maybe narrow lanes or add in refuge islands for pedestrians, and then also educate and do targeted speed enforcement there as well. So kind of look at this in more of a comprehensive way, I think is what we're looking at doing.
Tara.
Thank you for a very informative presentation, Kim. Just curious, in terms of, I know you said, there's 5 targets that must be set, that the Federal Highways requires, and we have not met all of them. Just curious where the state of Illinois stands respective to national trends. How does, our because it seems like this is a very macro level analysis that the state does, but where does the state sit relative to others nationally?
Yeah.
Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so in terms of fatalities and serious injuries, trends are similar. That other states across the country are also seeing increases in fatalities and also seeing increases in fatalities for pedestrians and vulnerable road users. So that's been a major concern and it's been discussed at a lot of the AASHTO Committee on Safety meetings. In terms of target setting, I think that there may have been 10 agencies that set increasing targets. So a majority of agencies across the country do not set those. I'm just thinking through the graphics, do not set them as they do have a lot of visionary targets. The other thing is we have historically not met those targets. Every year we've not met those targets. And where there are a handful of other states that are in the same position that they haven't met those targets. And some of them, like us, have not met them ever. Others have met them every now and then randomly. So there was a big discussion on target setting at the Committee on Safety meeting and really debating, are these target settings really moving us in the right direction? They do spark a conversation, and they do help us to think about what can we do differently in order to bring them down. But we also recognize that behavior, traffic safety culture, other influences are going to take more to really move the needle in the other direction. So yes, unfortunately, I think Illinois has some other people in the same position with our, fatalities increasing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I have 2 questions. You mentioned that you're gaining over time an understanding of what's most effective. How are you doing that? Are you doing before and after analyses? Do you look at the locations where projects have been built and see if they're working?
So that happens at different levels, I'd say. So I think the districts are looking at whether or not they're effective, but you're right. I think a lot of our energy is spent at the front end, identifying high priority locations that we think are going to perform well once we put this treatment in. From an HSIP standpoint, in Illinois, we have gone back and looked at all the contracts and the HSIP investments through, starting in 2005, when the program previously was focused on all crashes, then it became focused on fatalities and serious injuries starting in 2005. So funding starts to get allocated for this particular metric at that point. So we took all of those contracts, they're all in GIS, and aligned them with both the investment and the countermeasure that was invested there. And sometimes they're it's part of another project as well. So it's, in some cases, it's clean and it's easy to say this countermeasure or treatment has had this effect statewide versus others where we may say systemic, like chevron signs across a community or across a county have also had effect, but we need to kind of bundle those together. So what we did is we did this analysis and that was finished a couple of years ago now, but we have a new set of contracts. And so we're actually reviewing all of those right now to come up with a new measure for the statewide impact, as well as you can kind of filter down and look at any individual district. So what did it, or any individual local community to say, what did we CMAP as a region do? You know, where did we invest our money in HSIP? What was approved? And did we see the reduction in fatalities and serious injuries? We can also look at it from the perspective of if we said, you know, pedestrians are the crash type that we really want to address, then look at the countermeasures that addressed pedestrians and then determine whether or not they were effective, looking at the before and after crashes. So it's based on before and after crashes that are available in the database, right? So you've got longer years if it was a project in 2006, if it's a project in 2020, then you don't have as much after data, but that's an ongoing cumulative process. So you'll be hearing more about that, I'd say in the coming months. It's something that we're wrapping up now, but I would say in the spring, you'll have better evaluation data on that. We also looked at investment from the highway safety plan on enforcement and hours of enforcement. Looking at the grant expenditures, their step grant expenditures for particular days of the year, and looked at the communities that utilize those and then compared the hours of enforcement over time. And you can see, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but there is a crash modification factor that essentially says, you know, for the number of hours that you increase, here's how many crashes and severe crashes you can anticipate to decrease as part of that too. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. And just a follow-up on a different question. You had mentioned also that if we don't spend all the HSIP, if we don't achieve our targets, the requirement is to spend all our HSIP money on safety. Do we ever have trouble spending all our HSIP money and we don't spend it all on safety?
That's a good question, and that might be a BSPE question, going back to them. In recent years, I would say no. I think that we're always looking for good projects. And sometimes, this is probably generally speaking, maybe not on the HSIP, but sometimes there are funds available and we need to spend them quickly. And then we look for like, what are the shovel ready projects that we can do now? So that's something that we really look to for kind of long range. How do we plan for this? How do we make sure that we continue to invest that money? I know in some years we've done like systemic projects across the state, like a high friction surface treatment or wrong way driving an initiative that really has an impact on that kind of overall budget for individual years as well. That may not be an ongoing program, but might be for 1 year individually. So does that help? It's coming. I don't know of a year where that's certainly not in recent years that money hasn't been spent, allocated and spent. So.
Question?
Yes.
In the 15 million you talk about for the vulnerable road users, do you anticipate that going to the 70-30 split of state local? Is that how that will work, or will the 15 million be state funding or mostly local funding?
I don't think we know that answer yet, but I will say it won't come specifically. It's going to come out of the pot, right? But it won't be 30%. Now you've got 15% to spend on PEDs, and now you've got the other 15 to spend on other things. It won't be that. It's going to be more broad, but I'm not sure exactly what those percentages and numbers are going to look like. I know that's something that BSPE is really looking at hard now. One of the statewide initiatives, at least at the state level, has been looking at signalized intersections where there's high angle and turning crashes, and then converting those to protected lefts. That I think if that statewide, which I think that statewide initiative is going to continue. One element I think we need to look at with that are the pedestrian crashes, because if we add in a leading pedestrian interval with those locations, then it has a great crash modification factor for both pedestrians and for those ankle and turning crashes. So that's one thing I know that the BSPE is starting to look at right now at a statewide level.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, as a regular pedestrian, I appreciate it, and all of your work you're doing. Question, so we talked about the state-local split for this funding. I've heard narratives that at times those projects don't link up. Like, let's say there's a local road and a state road. And is there an opportunity there for the state funding and the local funding to kind of team up, to be combined, to put treatments at an intersection?
See, here we get into BSPE questions,
Okay.
probably.
Yeah.
Obviously, this happens a lot, right? Where we have, maybe a local agency is very concerned about a location because a lot of the crashes around the state system
Yeah.
it impacts all of us. So it's a multiple jurisdictional issue. In that case, we would consult with the district, and then that money would likely be done by the district. So the answer is the district, it would come out of the district pot of money, not the local agency pot of money for HSIP. However, they need to agree that this is the appropriate project to use the funds on.
Okay, so a local could not add their money to a state project necessarily that the state's doing if it intersects both. Okay, yeah,
Well, I think the key is the local agency dollars are smaller, and
Yeah.
therefore we want to make sure that
Sure.
there are good projects. And then I think that there's a little bit of flexibility in how projects are completed.
No, that
So-
makes sense, thanks. If an IDOT district, when an IDOT district is designing a roadway project on the IDOT system, to what extent are you or your other IDOT safety colleagues involved in that process of designing and engineering an IDOT project?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Steve Schulke, IDOT Region 1. Typically, we rely heavily on our Bureau of Operations, who does certainly when we review, we do crash reports for all of our phase ones or preliminary engineering. Those crash reports typically get reviewed by Traffic of Operations if it is a difficult project. And we've gotten a lot of the low-hanging fruit over the last 5 years. We have rumble strips everywhere, for example. Now we're getting into more complicated projects. Some of those do get kicked back to BSPE or down to central office to review it. But in general, we rely heavily on our operations folks that they have to operate that every day. So they kind of know exactly what's going on and what the appropriate countermeasures are.
Wonderful, thank you. One final question. In areas where we're seeing dangerous driving, is automated enforcement an option you're looking to pursue as you're looking at all the treatments?
Automated enforcement has been effective in some locations really across the country and needs to be implemented in places that are appropriate to do that. Right now, I think photo speed enforcement in Illinois is allowed in work zones, but not in other areas on the state system.
Right.
And for red light running, right, on the local system is also being utilized. I don't know, and maybe others in the room have an idea of, those policy questions and,
Yeah.
legislative questions for consideration at other levels within the agency or the state on the opinion or approach to that. Obviously, we also have the speed enforcements in school zones,
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah, I acknowledge it may take legislative changes if that was something you're wanting to
Yeah.
pursue. Okay. I mentioned that just because I was standing at a bus stop the other day and I watched 17 cars in a row not stop at a stop sign. And as a pedestrian, I was with someone who doesn't work in this field and they were like, I don't feel comfortable crossing this road. And to be honest, I didn't either, right? You got to go, you got to wave, you got to get their attention. Hey, like, please stop. Like, I feel like I'm begging them to stop, and it's all just so they don't hit me. So I don't know. That's why I'm asking some of these questions and you've answered them well. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, and I appreciate the questions and the dialogue, and we're all here to do the best we can for this, right? I mean, we live this every day. And I have seen this change in behavior, it seems like over time, where there is more speeding, there's more distraction, there's more, maybe not as much sort of respect for pedestrians, and bicyclists. And how do we get to that point where we really understand you're vulnerable, you're walking in this crosswalk, I need to slow down, it's my responsibility to slow down. So I do think that this is something that we need to have more conversations about. We need to think about how to do this more holistically. And we can't necessarily have enforcement everywhere, right? But it influences, thinking about different ways to influence behavior, and maybe it's also vehicle too. There are opportunities there, and there's certainly more pedestrian detection that's also within vehicles. So it really needs to be comprehensive, but I share your concerns and life experiences.
Thank you.
It can be harrowing just to get to work each day.
Thanks. Yeah, I had the same question that Audrey did about evaluation and before and after analysis. And it sounds like you're saying this data exists in some different places. The districts do some of that evaluation, then it happens also at the state level. For this committee's discussion and for the work that the region is doing on the safety action plans, I would be really interested in seeing some level of breakdown of evaluation. Are the investments that we're making resulting in reduction in crashes, serious injuries, and fatalities? What categories of investments are having more success? Which ones aren't having any success at all? Because we are, I think, rightfully putting more and more money into trying to attack these problems. And I think it's really important for us to know what's working and what's not working. So I don't know what the best format for that is and how much of that work can happen at the state level or is already happening or is already planned at the regional level. I think it's critical here. Obviously, there are other factors, behavioral factors, things beyond our control. The thing that isn't in our control is the engineering. And there's decades of research that shows that engineering changes can result in reductions. So what engineering changes are working, what aren't, and how can we focus investment in those areas?
Yeah, that's a great comment. I appreciate that. And just to clarify, and maybe Steve wants to comment on the district level, because it's my understanding that there may not be a formal process. I don't know if there's a formal process at the at the district level to say this project's working, this one isn't. However, I'll say, BSPE is taking on that kind of statewide ownership of the HSIP program and review of, building that database over time and reviewing it so that that information can be made available. I think right now, some of that information is used for informing the HSIP program. But as there's additional data that's being added to it right now. And as that version is done or is complete, then I think that this is a great point that we can take back if there's interest here in gaining a better understanding is, what are the questions? What do you want to know from that data? And then how can that be shared to help guide all of the safety programs that you're working on? Yeah, so I'll take that comment back to BSPE folks, and we'll talk about sort of next steps for that information. Did you want to talk, Steve, about the district level or anything?
Sure. At a district level, we do not have a formal process. In general, our Bureau of Traffic does do kind of spot before and after improvements. All of them have great numbers, when they do a before and after, especially if they look at a roundabout location. But we don't have necessarily a formal process for that.
Yeah, and I'll say the evaluation that we're looking at is before and after crashes. And well, we'll see. I'd like to see in the future, we start looking at other metrics too, to see if it's changing behavior, but we'll see. We need a little bit more data and different data sources in order to get to that. But that's where I think we can be in the future. So.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, so after the last meeting, in thinking about coming back here and giving this presentation to you all and having somebody that could answer the potentially wide range of questions that that could come to us. You know, Stefan, our Bureau Chief of Safety Programs Engineering, wasn't available, and the presentation you just saw, and some of the names on the board here, aside from Kim's, represent basically different business units of IDOT that implement these programs. And so we would have had to have probably brought 4 or 5 people up here to be able to give you the presentation and the expertise behind the answers that you just got. Kim's a national expert. She helped deliver the AASHTO Safety Summit in Kansas City a couple months ago, does a lot more work. So we're really fortunate to have her come here. So thank you, Kim. And if anybody's got any other questions later on, just shoot us a note.
All right, that's better. So thanks, Tammy. Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks to IDOT for coming up on relatively short notice and coming up and giving this presentation. This is very helpful. I think we had a great discussion on it, and looking forward to next steps as we continue into 2024 with a lot of safety initiatives going on. So I'm sure we'll continue the discussion and try to make an improvement. All right, moving back to item 4.03. We have Vicky here with us today to discuss the 2024 roadway safety performance targets and our considerations today. So thank you, Vicky, and welcome back.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And I have a lot of comments based on the last discussion that we will have in future meetings in 2024. I do want to quickly note that our Safe Streets and Roads for All program will include a robust monitoring and evaluation process, which will be tied. The goal is to have it tied to this target setting process, and we'll share and hopefully collaborate on that as a committee and an agency. So good morning, everyone. Happy December. I'm here to quickly recap the 2024 highway safety targets for approval today. I'll start with a very brief overview, recap of what the targets are, remind you all of our intention to set regional safety targets in future years. I will quickly detail the actual targets for 2024 for approval today, and then we can have a quick discussion about maybe some ideas for 2024 and how we can continue to collaborate on safety. So as you know, the targets are part of the HSIP program, and I want to thank Kim and IDOT for giving such a great overview of how the targets and HSIP work together. They are one of a few federal performance measures that are required. MPOs are required to identify targets since the MAP 21 federal authorization bill in 2014. But we have the option to support state targets, which our research shows most MPOs do. MPOs do have the option to identify their own regional targets, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. They're set annually. Next slide. Yeah, and as I mentioned at a presentation to this committee in September, it's CMAP's intention to set regional targets in future years. It has been encouraged by our federal partners, and they have encouraged us to set targets that are informed by work plans and data, and really use the target setting program to have discussions like we've had here today, and to inform work plan items across the safe system approach that will help us reach the targets. We have a lot of agency safety work in progress. We are excited to be kicking off our SS48 plans right now. The Safe Streets and Roads for All federal grant that we received. And we will also be working carefully to do this work in step with our next long-range transportation plan, which will be tied with our targets and our policies and programs that we'd like to see implemented. So to quickly recap our 2024 roadway safety targets, the process which I showed last time is here. We're currently in the November-December category, presenting to Transportation Committee for approval, which will allow us to take these safety targets to the CMAP board and MPO policy committee in early 2024 for approval. These are the 5 safety performance targets, all on one slide. I'll go quickly through the charts because I think it helps a lot to understand how they relate to trends. The fatalities target for 2024 is 1,121.9. This represents a 2% policy-based reduction because the fatality trend, as Kim noted, has been going up. So this target reflects an agency commitment to reversing the trend. And of course, 2023 data is not informing that target because it's not yet complete. The rate of fatalities target is set at 1.105. This also represents a 2% policy-based reduction, again, with the desire to reverse the trend. And the next slide will show the serious injuries target. Serious injuries have been declining downward as desired. Therefore, a different methodology was used. This is a least squares regression. And the serious injuries target is set at 8,418 for 2024. The rate of serious injuries was set in the same manner using least squares, and that target is set as 8.498 for 2024. And the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries target is set at 1,375.7 for 2024, again, representing the trend line method. So our recommendations, just to recap, we aim to set regional safety targets that are informed by our upcoming safety work that will happen at a regional scale. It will be in alignment with our long-range transportation plan. It will not only reflect our agency commitment to Vision Zero, but it will be informed by the work needed to achieve the targets, which will be identified projects, programs, policies, behavior, education programs, all of it in our Safe Streets and Roads County Safety Action Plans. We intend and recommend to support IDOT's targets in the years until we have the plans complete. So that means we are anticipating and supporting IDOT targets for 2024, as I presented today, and most likely for 2025 as well. And of course, we will continue to work towards our zero deaths commitment, which is identified in our On to 2050 plan. And with that, I hope we're ready for approval.
Thank you, Vicki. So we can get this on the floor. I'll entertain a motion to approve the roadway safety targets. And check, seconded. Karen, thank you very much. Any questions, comments, discussions for Vicki today? All right, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you, Vicki. Appreciate it.
Great, and I'm going to give one more opportunity for sharing here. This discussion today and the discussions that we've had on safety throughout the years have been really robust and have really helped inform our work and identified the needs of the region. So I want to let you all know that we have been having lots of discussions of ways to keep this committee engaged on our traffic safety work and the traffic safety work of our partners. So we look forward to more of this in 2024. And we've also been thinking a lot about the role that this committee in particular can play in traffic safety. You know, we know that there are a lot of local needs when it comes to improving traffic safety, access to money, access to resources. And we've also been hearing a lot of challenges across the region with multi-jurisdictional issues in terms of right-of-way, funding, coordinating projects across different jurisdictions. So we hope to have more guided discussions in the coming year and years on topics such as the issues and opportunities with interjurisdictional projects, funding, access to funding for safety work, you know, programs like John just mentioned that really address improving the traffic safety culture in our region. And focusing on the risk factors that are more prevalent at the regional scale than they are, say, at the state scale. So vulnerable road users, pedestrians and bicyclists all kind of have an extra emphasis at a regional scale. So I invite you all to suggest topics on this. If there's something you want to hear about or a discussion you'd like to have, or you think there's a role for this committee to play in terms of improving traffic safety, feel free to share it. Feel free to reach out to me at any time and we'll consider that.
Great. Yeah, Audrey.
I just wanted to make the connection between traffic safety and what Amy mentioned in the introduction about the PART plan, that making sure that we fund transit and getting people using the safest modes possible is going to have a material effect on our traffic safety. If we were to let the transit system collapse, the amount of EMT that would happen and the amount of safety impact would be very negative. So let's remember how it's all connected and how important it is for us to fully fund our transit system as a safety strategy.
Transit is the safest mode. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Vicky? Otherwise, like you said, you can shoot her an email for future discussions if there's any topics or something that pop into your mind. So thank you, Vicky. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, skipping over item 5.01, we covered that already. Moving on to item 6, legislative updates. We do not have any updates today, but CMAP staff is available if there's any questions. Seeing none, moving on to other business. Is there any other business that committee members would like to bring forward today? Jack.
Question for you, Kevin. As we set or you set the agendas coming up for the next year, what does that process look like? Like, how could we maybe talk with you about incorporating additional conversations about safety, things like that?
I can
It looks
say a little bit, but I
email
think
to
Amy would be a
me.
little more.
It's a rather informal process. I mean, there's sort of standard business that we have to achieve as part of our traditional MPO role with tip amendments and things like that. But certainly, with major initiatives, I sort of have a sense for, how we need to stage a series of discussions, and that's kind of what we're trying to do right now. But if there are topics that pop up that you feel like would be beneficial to bring before the committee, just send me an email.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Amy. Yeah.
Hi. Speaking of targets and performance measures, we know there's a new federal rule around greenhouse gas emissions targets and reporting. And also couldn't help but notice every time we do conformity analysis, we're not showing the greenhouse gas emissions reduction that I think we'd all like to see. So how does CMAP or IDOT, I guess, also intend to set targets for greenhouse gas emissions reduction?
I think it'd be good to turn the mic over to Martin Menninger. He'll be handling that for CMAP.
Sure. So we're just, there was just a webinar this week on greenhouse gases that several CMAP staff attended. It sounds like we will have to set 3 targets, one for the MPO region, one for Round Lake Beach, and one for the Chicago-Gary MSA. So we'll be collaborating with our partner MPOs on our MSA targets. We expect to have a target from the state sometime early next year, and then we will have 6 months to set that target. The state target will be set based on fuel sales. MPOs have some flexibility in how to set those targets, but most likely we'll be using our travel model and moves. So over the next few months, we'll be calibrating. We have to set a 2022 baseline. So we'll be developing a baseline, developing some alternative methods for setting targets to discuss internally and with some partners, and then bringing those to Climate Committee, TC, MPO, and the board. So that should happen in the summer. We'll be setting those targets, but we don't have the exact options yet. But
so not to get ahead of the process, but do you expect the targets will be largely baseline, or will you have like policy-based targets in there as well around goals for reductions?
We haven't gotten that far, but there will be reducing targets. So yeah.
Okay. So I'll be excited to see that come to this group.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. I think Megan had, yeah.
I just wanted to throw in that IDOT will be doing a statewide target, and that will be the first target that will be set. And like Martin said, then after that, the MPOs have 6 months to identify what they would like for their targets to be. They do have to be decreasing targets, but there is not necessarily a penalty. Really from the webinar that we were on earlier this week, it sounds like this is going to be a big learning process, and that we're all just going to be working together to make this work as best we can.
Oh, and if I could add one other thing, we're gonna set these targets this cycle, but it will be before our climate action plan will be completed. And we expect that that process will inform, maybe more detailed targets or potentially refine the targets as part of that larger exercise. So.
Sure, Amy, go ahead.
So, you know, just much like how we've been approaching the safety discussion, I think we have to recognize we have to do some of these things that are federally required. We're going to be setting targets, but it's also part of an ongoing discussion. Even though we set those targets, we know there's more work to do to be smarter about how we move forward our priorities and our initiatives to move the region in a better direction. So just know, even though we set the targets, maybe summertime next year, that is a starter for discussion. And there's going to be a lot more to come right through the regional transportation plan.
All right. Anyone else at the committee? Or go ahead, Mike.
Well, I think Megan kind of already covered what I was going to say. Yeah, we've got a baseline calculated right now. We're talking about what approaches to use to set targets. If anybody's ever, I mean, we've kind of looked at a bunch of other state DOTs to see what they're doing. And, you know, a lot of them are factoring in expected EV adoption, which ramps pretty sharply over the next 10, 20 years and is going to result in pretty significant GHG reductions if it holds. There's other states that are, you know, maybe they've got a you know, very, very strong clean fuels program and stuff like that. There's other states doing some pretty complicated things to kind of come up with these targets. I don't know that we're going to do that yet. To me, kind of along Amy's line of thinking, the most important thing right now is to get a target and start looking at the numbers. And I think our baseline came up to like, was it 28.28 million metric tons? And so, you know, these are mind-boggling numbers that I think are pretty difficult to relate to. And so I think part of the value in this process is going to be actually taking a look at that, looking at trends, starting to identify things we may or may not be able to influence in that, you know, sort of focus on what we can control. As Megan mentioned, we have to have our target set, baseline and target set in February. Then the MPOs have got some time after that. We have a statewide MPO meeting, I think, set up in January. We're going to bring some information to that sort of on where we're at. And yeah, I think this is going to be a continual conversation, kind of like safety, right along with what Amy was saying. So anyway, just wanted to add that since I was here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Michael. And just as a matter of clarification for all the newer committee members, so I just whispered to Amy just to clarify. So this committee does approve the recommendations for greenhouse gases, the goal for consideration, right? So we would just recommend and it would get passed and voted on by MPO policy. So, thank you.
Kevin.
Yes, Jared, go ahead.
Just wanted to note here that the Illinois EPA's EV charging NOFO closes next week, $27 million.
Yeah.
Real,
Go ahead, Mayor.
just wanted to, just real quickly, to recognize the fact of, the passing of one of the mayors, Glenn Rybeck, from Wadsworth. He was, a member of CMAP, as a council of mayors. He was also one of the alternates. So he'd occasionally be either transportation or STP. And, you know, just the fact that he passed away a few weeks ago. And also to thank CMAP staff, that those that were out to be a part of his passing. That was, I'm sure the family is going to recognize it, but I just wanted to, from the Council of Mayors, pass that on to those that are here. that, and also to the CMAP staff for, their consideration, so.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And Mayor Rybeck was a great guy. He's up in Lake County and we worked with him for numerous years and he's been a big part of our council of mayors and not only, I mean, he was one of the most positive people you ever met, looking out for Wadsworth, looking out for Lake County, but really looking out for the region. I mean, he was just looking to make our region a better place. So definitely thoughts and prayers with his family and we're going through some tough times right now. So thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up. Yep. Any other business? Committee members? All right, moving on to public comment. Does anyone wish to address us from the audience today? Terry, we have anybody? Nobody came forward. All right, if you are online, please notify staff by using the raise hand function. And then staff will identify you before addressing the committee.
We have Garland Armstrong to make a comment.
Happy holidays to you. It's Garland Armstrong and Heather Armstrong from formerly Des Plaines, now living in Des Moines, Iowa. How you doing, everybody?
Great. One of our favorite parts of the meeting, Garland and Heather.
Yep. So I just want to give kudos to Mike Conley, thanking him for being on the CTA. I'm coming and thanking him for helping me get on the ADA advisory committee and also being there to give him some good suggestions for not only for the Chicagoland area, but for CTA. And Mike, if you're there, maybe one day you should come out here as a getaway retirement to come out to Iowa and see different things that you might never thought of as your retirement vacation. So we hope we can look forward to get together and we can talk more and see what you can think of. And also too, I just have a suggestion that in 2024 for CMAP, why not have an ADA advisory committee, like meet every 3 months, like something like CTA, Metro, PACE, and RTA doing. So like so different ADA, so the coordinators can go to different committee meetings and then report it to the MPO and board meetings so that they can have good reports on it so that the disability community will know what is going on coming up in 2024 so that they can be extremely well prepared and then we can get it all collaborate together so that the ADA won't be disconnected and so it will be all the package we need. So and then for those who cannot speak clear English, we need some also good translators too in the disability community too, so that they'll be knowing what's going to be coming up in 2024 so that they can be a part of it. So like they said, we're all part of the solution and not the problem. So that's what we need to do. And I think that will be a good suggestion of that. And also just want you to know that my wife's birthday is counting down fast to New Year's Day. And her birthday is on New Year's Day and she's right here. And then it's going to be like a wonderful, great last holiday. So if you have any questions or comments on what I said, and I'll be glad to answer it from y'all.
Great. Sorry, Heather, are you there? Do you want to say anything?
Hi
Cut you off
there. It's very interesting. I enjoy them too.
Great. I appreciate the comments. Thank you, Garland and Heather. Happy early birthday and hope you guys have a good holiday and a happy new year.
You too.
Anyone else, Terry or Kama? Nope. All right. Next meeting will be March 1st, 2024. So we got a little bit of break ahead of us. CMAP staff is working on getting calendar invites out to all committee members and alternates in the next week or so. So you can look forward to that. And seeing no other business in front of us today, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Anyone? Mayor, second? Jackie. All right. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Have a happy holidays, safe new year. And we'll see you in March.